Hello, wonderful people. I am so excited to be here and sharing all of this information with you. So first of all, thank you for jumping on and checking out my very first YouTube video. This is just going to be a sit down, face-to-face chat and talking all about things weight loss and performance, how to balance the two, how to focus on the two if you've got both as goals, and then also just potentially some tips as well if just weight loss is your goal or just performance is your goal. I want to share it in a way that is not just like, hey, look at me, this is what I do, because I am actually a coach. I'm not just someone that wants to jump on here and be like, oh, look what I eat in a day, use that to inspire you. I actually want to provide you with like educational information that is science-backed and will actually help you achieve your results and make it specific for you. So that's what the goal of this is. I will be sharing a little bit about my journey just to be so that you can understand a little bit deeper what is going on and hopefully use some of those stories to actually explain some of the science and some of the reasonings behind some of the things that I do when I'm working with clients. So first of all, I will, as this is obviously the first episode, I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction about myself and then I'm going to talk a little bit about my own weight loss and weight gain journey, and then we'll talk a little bit about why I'm putting myself into a deficit, how I'm going about that, how I'm making sure I am still eating enough to fuel my training and to be performing well in my training, and then I'm going to go through some of my main or top tips on helping you balance performance and weight loss if those are your goals, and then that's it. I have got some notes so that I stay on track, so please bear with me if I am looking down. I'll try not to. All right, so basically my name is Bex Attwell. I'd say I'm more of a strength coach, PT, but I do also have a degree in nutrition. So when I was at high school, it was funny, I was telling this story last night, and I feel like it's quite interesting because when I was year 10, you basically got to choose. So going into NCEA, must have been going into level 1 NCEA, so like third year of high school, you were allowed to start choosing like your subjects, and I was like, nah, I'm dropping science. Like, get me the fuck out of this. I do not want to be doing science at school anymore. I'm done. I was going to do accounting and economics, and I was going to be a valuer, just like my dad. And I had this one conversation with a teacher, and she was like, Bex, if you drop science now and you change your mind, it is a lot harder to pick up science when you go to university than it is to pick up accounting and economics. So I'd recommend you keep science just for another year until you're like 100% sure on what you want to do. Thank goodness I listened to that teacher, because I ended up doing all 3 sciences at high school, and then I went and did a Bachelor of Science at uni. I went to uni in Otago to do a physio degree. Ideally, I was going to try and get into physiotherapy and become a physiotherapist, but after my first year in health science, I did get accepted into physio. Physio and pharmacy were the 2 that I got accepted into, and then I was like, I don't want to be touching people for the rest of my life. And especially at that point in time, I was like, it'd be cool to be a sports physio, but I realized how hard it is to actually be a physio with like a sports team, and how challenging it is, and how very few people are able to go down that path. And that was kind of a bit of a turn off. I really decided I didn't want to be touching people for the rest of my life. And then I decided I didn't want to be stuck in a pharmacy like all the time either. So that's basically, and on that day, and I had to make my decision whether I was going to accept these places in these 2 schools, and I was like, oh, I don't want to do either of them. And a friend of mine ended up messaging and was like, oh, hey, I'm going to do a nutrition degree. And I was like, oh, I could do that. So I decided to do a nutrition degree instead. I didn't want to drop out of uni. I felt like I had to, and my parents always pushed me to like make sure I was finishing things. So I tried to jump on. I decided I was going to do a nutrition degree, and then was really enjoying it. I decided like throughout my nutrition degree again, I was like, oh, I don't want to be in hospitals giving like meal plans to sick people. Decided that's not what I wanted to be doing. Like, I didn't want to be a clinical dietitian. So I ended up doing my PT certificate and was like, I really want to be helping people get healthy before they end up like having diseases and needing to see more of like a clinical dietitian, which is the only way that I really understood, or the only option I really understood was the way to go. So I did my PT certificate, and that was really fun. I really enjoyed doing that. I did do it all online, and looking back now, I'm like, that was kind of a joke, But I do believe that I have spent a lot of time, and I moved to Australia as well after I finished my degree to go and be a PT. So I have definitely made the effort to learn as much as I possibly could about the human body, how it works. Obviously, taken my nutrition degree, I've done a few other nutrition courses that are more focused on fat loss. I've done a bunch of like coaching courses with different coaches, especially in Australia. There's some incredible coaches that you can learn from to kind of progress myself as a PT beyond what I learned in that PT certificate, because that was very much so just the basics. And then I spent 5 years in Australia. I was PTing for the first 2.5 years or so, and then I ended up managing an F45 because I decided that my new goal was that I wanted to own my own gym, and that was going to be my big goal. Might still happen one day, but not at this stage. So I went over to F45. I actually got asked to apply for the head trainer role. And then when the week before I was supposed to start as a head trainer, the studio manager who was supposed to be above me decided to resign. And so quite quickly got thrown into the studio manager role. And then they brought on someone else to basically kind of be above me in terms of like F45 because he knew a lot more about F45. But yeah, we ended up being quite equal, and I really enjoyed my time at F45. Learned a lot about coaching, learned a lot about working with hundreds of different people. And yeah, that basically brought me up to COVID. And I was in Melbourne for COVID. It got pretty horrific. And I have shared a bit of this with a lot of people. It was just, I feel like compared to New Zealand, we were just in a really like negative, toxic space. And the whole experience was like, no, you're not allowed to do this. You're bad. You're not doing as you're told. You have to stay in lockdown for longer. And so it just felt really awful. They also closed the gyms for like a really long time. And then I think in September, so we'd been doing F45 live, so like taking F45 classes on Zoom for months. And while it was cool for like the situation that we were in, I never want to have to do that again. It did really help me with like being able to cue people, because when someone's on like this tiny little screen and you don't have the like tactile ability to touch them and move them, I found that it really helped with like my cueing and my ability to explain an exercise differently. Because I find when I'm working with people, it's all well and good if like you know what it takes for your body to do an exercise, or like how your brain understands it to do a certain movement. But if you use that same cue to someone else and they move completely differently, it's quite tricky to have to like reanalyze what you're saying in a way that's going to make sense to like how they've responded to what you said. I think that makes sense. But yeah, I found that F45 like really helped me with that and really helped with my cueing. Especially in terms of like creating exercise videos and things for my app now. Anyway, a little bit off track. So COVID brought me back to New Zealand, and I ended up getting really sick with chronic fatigue and POTS, and didn't really like know what was going on, but I just basically was like getting migraines quite severely, like couldn't see, was basically bedridden for like a lot of that time. So I decided that I was going to study, and I was going to go back, and I wanted to do a sports coaching degree because I thought that would really go well alongside my nutrition degree, and then I'd be able to go more into like the sports strength and conditioning space. And at the time, it was also like, okay, well, I'm over 24, I can get a student allowance, and that would help me financially. So I'd be like progressing my career while also getting like, not really making money, but like getting money. So I went into the university, had a chat with someone, was like, gonna do that. And they were like, look, you've already got a degree, why don't you do a master's instead? And I was like, oh, like, yeah, if I can do a sports science master's off my nutrition degree, like that would be awesome. And I did do some sports nutrition papers, so that carried over quite well. And they were like, yeah, absolutely, we'd love to have you in our master's course. So that sounded great. And I was like, sweet, let's do that. And then realized that I couldn't actually get funding. I couldn't get an allowance for doing postgrad. So that kind of like defeated the purpose of like trying to do something while I was struggling with my health. But it was fine. I ended up making it work. And that's when I shifted a lot of my business to online and became an online coach doing strength training and I'd quit my job at F45. So that's why I was like, oh, I need to transition. But I did try working in person as a one-on-one PT for a while, but I just found that with my health at the time, I was getting migraines, I was having to cancel clients, having to cancel classes, and I was just really struggling. So it was just like not worth the damage that it was doing. I just wasn't able to handle it, basically. hopefully one day I will be able to get back into one in-person coaching in a gym, because I do really love that and I do miss like seeing people. But that's okay. Like, I'm doing a PhD now, so I'll get that done first. So yeah, I did my master's and then stepped into doing a PhD on the menstrual cycle and elite female athletes. So I've been traveling, or I got to travel at the start of the year with a professional sports team, and basically we've tracked their hormones, their recovery. We were very fortunate to get Whoop bands for research, so that was pretty epic to be able to use Whoop bands, and then we're going to compare their Whoop data, like their recovery and their sleep, with what's going on with their hormones. The biggest part for me is that I think, especially with female athletes, there's a lot that's coming out with like cycle syncing. And while I think it's great that we're learning to listen to our bodies, I think cycle syncing and being like, oh, you can only do a week of different type, like 1 week of hard, you just have to do the first week as easy training, and the second week is like you can train hard. And it's just too structured and too rigid. And it also doesn't really work if you are trying to train for something. So especially if you're in like a team environment, then you can't really like just do yoga for a week. It's, like you've got to compete. Team environments, a lot of the time in season, you're playing games every single week, and you don't want to be like not included in the team because you haven't been able to train. So a big part of what I wanted to research was like, well, how can we help women get back to baseline? Because I do believe that we feel more fatigued at different times of our cycle. That varies for different women. Our bodies, it's just harder to train. You feel weaker. You don't feel as good. So it's like, okay, well, what can we actually do to support women to show up at least to like their baseline at all times in their cycle? So that's what we wanted to research. It's more about like performance readiness. And I think we've done that really well. I'm really excited for the results to come out and to be able to give like summaries to all the individual athletes that I worked with, and be like, hey, this is what your hormones were doing. This is what your recovery did. Here's some patterns. You can do with that what you will, and potentially as well the next steps is to be like, okay, well, if a woman is under recovered at this time of her cycle, do we need to pull her training back? Do we need to feed her more? Do we need to just get more sleep? Or are there any other things that we can do to support her to be able to train at her best or show up and perform at her best? So that's my research. In terms of my own training, I was a middle distance cross country runner all through high school. I absolutely loved it. I spent a lot of years and a lot of time traveling and racing, which was pretty epic. I had some awesome opportunities at the school that I went to. But I was always pretty tiny. Like at one point when I got my period quite late, no one really was too concerned at that time, because I feel like it wasn't really that spoken about. But I did get my period I think I was must have been 16, 17. So it's not late enough that it's hugely concerning, but it was definitely a lot later than most of my friends. And I think that was just because I was training a lot and not really eating enough. So there was a period, I think my mum actually paid me I think I got $20 per kilo I was able to put on. So I was eating McDonald's, I was eating as much as I could. I think I managed to put on 2 kilos, and that couple of kilos probably helped me actually get my period, because my body was was eating enough to fuel all of that to go on. So yeah, throughout high school, I was always really small, really tiny, and I didn't really like food. It wasn't that I was trying to lose weight or concerned about the way that I looked. I just didn't really like food. I didn't like meat. I was basically living off white bread and sandwiches, and I'd have the apricot chicken, and I'd dip my corn chips into the mince sauce, but I didn't like the mince. So I was a very picky eater, which definitely did not help. But I felt like I could basically eat anything that I wanted, and I never really got fat. Until I started getting really bad period cramps, had a lot of issues with my menstrual cycle, and that was impacting my racing. So I decided to go on the pill, and then I basically just blew up. Not it was still pretty small compared to average person, but it was a lot bigger for me, and I feel that really impacted my running performance as well. I just wasn't able to train as hard, and I just basically my performance tanked after that stage, which was really sad, because I feel I potentially had more in the tank. And I know everybody says that, and it's easy to look back, but it just frustrates me that there wasn't this knowledge or anyone to teach me what I'm learning now about how important fuel is for your performance, and how having a healthy menstrual cycle is super important, and just going on the pill to try and solve all the problems isn't necessarily the right way to go about it. But that is all probably a story for another day. I can go deeper into what I've learned now and how to think about your menstrual cycle and things like that. But once I left high school, I was like, I'm done with running. I was so frustrated. I just hadn't been performing how I'd wanted to be. And so I ended up going to Camp America, which was epic. But Camp America, I went in with this mindset that I could still eat whatever I wanted and it didn't matter. And I just basically stopped exercising. I think I went for a couple of runs while I was over there, but I didn't really train or exercise at all. We were pretty active at camp, but not like I had been running through high school. So I gained, I think, nearly 20 kilos over a 4-month period, which is quite a lot when I was pretty small, when I was had such a small frame. And so it's funny looking back because at the time I actually didn't really feel like I'd put on that much weight. In my mind, I thought maybe 4 or 5 kilos. And then I weighed myself when we went on a helicopter trip at the Grand Canyon. And oh my gosh, I was just mortified at how, not that I was I wasn't upset or I didn't think it was bad. I was just shocked, holy crap, this is a lot of weight that I've managed to put on. And I had a lot of family members come to me and be like, oh, you finally look healthy. And that really got to me because I'd gained all this weight. I was feeling so uncomfortable in my skin. None of my clothes fit really anymore. My boobs had also grown massively. And so that was also making it really hard to try and run. And I was being told that I was finally healthy and I wasn't healthy. I'd been eating I was having 4 bagels a day for breakfast. I was sneaking Pop-Tarts all through the day. So I was having 2 to 4 of those a day. And I would eat those big boxes of Nerds. I would demolish a whole packet of that in a day. So I wasn't really getting nutritious food at all. So the fact that I'd gained weight and now looked healthy, I feel that really got to me and frustrated me because I was it's actually got nothing to do with how much I weigh or how my body looks, whether I'm healthy or not. And so yeah, I definitely think you've got to be careful with commenting on people's weight, but I also think we need to learn to that those comments weren't about me. Those people were also making those comments because me being fatter made them feel better about themselves. And so it took me a long time. I got really frustrated about it in the moment and when I was younger, and it's kind of taken me until I'm a little bit older to realize those comments definitely had nothing to do with me. It was more about how they felt about themselves, and they felt better about themselves by saying that me having gained 20 kilos and I'm not a tall person. So that amount of weight, what I got up to, it was pretty heavy on my frame. But that's that part's irrelevant. But yeah, so I gained all this weight and then came home, basically went back to eating normal New Zealand food, which is has far less sugar in it. It's not dosed up on sugar like American food. And I started going to the gym with my boyfriend at the time. I was back at uni and the weight just fell off. I basically lost the 20 kilos plus very easily. Wasn't trying to lose weight, wasn't intentional at all. I just was I want to start eating healthier. And it's funny because when I was in America, before I went to America, I did not like meat. I'd eat sausages and I'd maybe have lamb chops, but I loved processed food. And all I was craving, and when I was at high school, we would go to a family friend's house and they would have home kill lamb roast and I wouldn't eat it. I didn't like cooked vegetables. I didn't like the texture. So the mum would have to make me my own white bread with tomatoes, and I'd have white bread tomato sandwiches. So that's the kind of diet that I was eating before I went to America. When I was in America, all I started craving was good meat. The most meat we had at Camp America, because it was all fun kids food, right? So the most meat that we got in America was this turkey roast as a Thanksgiving kind of week celebration. We did 2 weeks with the kids at a time. And so the most meat we got was this turkey sandwich, and it was from a roll. So all I wanted when I came home was a steak and a lamb roast and some cooked vegetables and a salad. So it was pretty easy when I came back. I just went straight back to eating a really healthy diet, and that's when I went to Dunedin and did my nutrition degree as well. When I was at uni, I'd lost all that weight quite easily and I'd started getting into the gym. I started just training, trying to be in the gym. I was on the boys' side. There was a girls' side and a boys' side at the uni gym, which I think was quite funny, but it was cardio and machines and then the actual weights. So I obviously went into the weight side and was training with my boyfriend at the time. Again, I was still pretty tiny. I tried squatting a 20 kilo bar and I got stuck at the bottom, which is pretty funny. to think back to. And then after probably like a couple of years of being in the gym, I started shifting more into the like bodybuilding side of things. And that's when I started to actually track my food and cut some calories and ended up doing a bikini bodybuilding show. If I remember, I will chuck up a photo here. So I did a bikini show. I just didn't have enough muscle on me. I hadn't been eating enough. I hadn't put on enough size to be in good shape at the time, but I did manage to get pretty tiny and lose quite a bit of weight. And so from like my peak in America to like that lowest, that would have been, what's that, 10? Yeah, about 20 kilos or so. 60, no, over 20 kilos, about 23 kilos. Anyway, doesn't really matter, but it was a big amount. And then I did the bodybuilding show, and obviously I'd cut my calories down quite low. I'd lost all this weight. I was looking really tiny. And at the time in my head, I was like, oh, I'm in this really good routine. I'm really structured. This is actually, it didn't feel hard. And my calories weren't super, super low compared to some of the other girls that were competing, but they were still relatively low. And I genuinely thought in the moment and during those weeks leading up to the show that I'd be able to maintain that afterwards and that it was going to be easy. But as most people do, you finish the show and I treated myself and I basically blew up and I put that 20 kilos back on. And that wasn't fun. That 20 kilos took a lot longer for me to be able to lose. And that's when I ended up going through a lot of like restricting binge eating cycles. And it honestly took probably like, 5 or 6 years before I was actually able to start losing that weight. And part of it as well was that I was going into trying to be really restrictive with my food, and then I was binge eating, which was like obviously not helping in the slightest. So I took after I kind of realized like what was going on and how bad it was, I also done like a bunch of nutrition courses through that time. I'd learned a lot about coaching. I was working with a lot of people. So I was seeing what was working for people and what wasn't. And then realized and I was also around a lot of other coaches who were in the bodybuilding space, and seeing like so many of us all go through this same kind of like cycle. Like you get into the gym, you feel good, you lose a bunch of weight, then you push it to the extreme, and then you rebound, and then you get stuck in this like up and down cycle. And I was like, I need to do this differently. Like something has to change. And so I spent the next, I can't remember how many years it was, but like up until now, basically I spent a lot of time like rebuilding my energy, rebuilding all of my like foundations of my nutrition, like getting better into my routine, making sure that I'm eating enough throughout the day and just rebuilding that. Then I went into the chronic fatigue. So I've basically been at maintenance or like a surplus for a long period of time, just so that I can get my energy levels up and feel like an actual human being. So I haven't really been in a deficit for a long time. I've been trying to keep my calories at like maintenance surplus, but that does mean that I have gained a bit of body fat, which is absolutely fine, and it has been definitely needed over this time. But it's also got me to a point now that I'm training again, my energy levels are up, I feel like I'm in a really healthy place, that I just want to put myself into a little bit of a deficit for a short amount of time, just partly because like a lot of my clothes aren't fitting and there's really not a vibe. It just feels uncomfortable. I'd love my clothes to fit a little bit better again, and especially coming into summer, just to feel that little bit comfortable in a bikini. So that's basically why I'm going into a deficit now. And I get really torn on like what message that I want to share on social media, because I think obviously there's like one camp that's like bodybuilding people and they're trying to lose weight and they're all about, and coaches are like selling transformations and selling like fat loss journeys and all of that, and that's great. And then there's like this other side of Instagram, which is like self-care and love your body. Like you shouldn't be trying to lose weight. Like just love your body how it is. And I think both can be true. I don't want to be a coach who was like absolutely one way or the other. And unfortunately that makes it really hard to what kind of message to put out there, because I think for some people, before I go into that, I think it's really important that you're not trying to lose weight because you think it'll make you happier. You're not trying to lose weight because it will make you feel better about yourself. I think you need to work on that first. You need to feel good about yourself, and then you can choose to change it. It's like, like why can't we change our hair color, and we put Botox in our faces, and we change our appearance in certain ways. So it's just like, it is something that is going to change the way you look. But I really think that you need to make sure that you're not putting how good of a person you are, or how valuable you are as a person, or your worth into the way that you look. And so I think you need to obviously work on that first, because when I lost all of the weight into the bodybuilding show, I was like, oh, I'm going to be really lean. I'm going to feel really good about myself. I'm going to be so confident. But that's not what got me confident. I built confidence when I was in F45 and I was having to show up and meet people and do hard things and overcome things that I felt uncomfortable doing. That was what built my confidence and made me feel better as a person. So I think that's kind of the first really important thing to share. The next part to that is that I think there are definitely people who are overweight, and losing weight is going to be healthy for them. So sharing the message that, oh, you don't need to lose weight, you just have to love your body how you are, I think that can be really harmful to a certain group of people. And I don't want to be, I don't mind if my opinions, people disagree with this opinion, that's absolutely fine. But I do work with a lot of women who are trying to lose weight to improve their health. Losing a bit of weight can help you fall pregnant if you're doing it in the right way. Obviously, being in a really crazy steep deficit is not going to help you fall pregnant. But for most women, losing a bit of body fat can be beneficial for their health and help them get pregnant. So I think that's important to understand that both things can be true. There are also some women who are really, really little, and they think that losing more weight is going to help them, when in fact they actually need to be eating more rather than less if they're trying to focus on their performance. So there's all these different people, and things can be true for different people in different times in their lives. And I think that's really important to touch on, not to feel bad because you're in a position where you're trying to lose weight and you're following people on Instagram or social media who are like, no, trying to lose weight is bad, don't do it, because that's their journey, that is their story, and that is their truth, and that's absolutely fine. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to kind of touch on there. I guess an example actually is this celebrity such as Adele. Obviously she's famous for her singing, but she related to a lot of people in the body positivity movement, because she was a bigger woman and she embraced her curves and she loved her body as she was. And then she went and lost a lot of weight. She looked incredible. And she did that for her health. Same as, oh my gosh, I can't remember her name, the Australian comedian. She's an amazing actress. But she initially got famous because she was an overweight, funny actress, and that's great. But then when she lost weight and lost weight because of PCOS, and she was trying to improve her health, people were hating on her, and it's like, that's so not fair. She's not going against looking after your body and body positivity. She's just respecting herself and looking after her health. So that's where I think it's really important to start thinking, are you doing it out of self-respect, or are you doing it out of self-hatred? Or are you just trying to challenge yourself and see how far you can challenge your body? Because that can be true too. So pretty much everything is in moderation, and it's obviously don't sacrifice your health to be achieving weight loss goals. But if your goal is performance, then maybe you shouldn't be doing a fat loss journey right in this moment. And like I said, things can change at different times in your life. So it's really important to just figure out what stage, what timeline you're in right now, and what is right and true for you. What are the reasons behind why you're doing it? Are you doing it for the right reasons? Are you doing it for healthy reasons? Or are you doing it because you have a toxic, unhealthy mindset and you think that losing weight is going to make you feel better about yourself and make you feel happy? Because, yeah, I hopefully articulated that kind of well. I just think that both can be true. I think you can love your body, and I think you can still want to lose weight. I don't think they're mutually exclusive or anything. So I just wanted to touch on that before I get into the actual tips and tricks that I wanted to share. Yeah, let's get into it. So basically, I think the first thing is to think about the timing, and I have just touched on this a little bit, but if you you're someone, you do want to lose some body fat, and you want to be a little bit leaner for whatever reason, but you're also trying to train for a race, whether it's a half marathon or a marathon or even a 10K, 5K, whatever you're trying to train for. If your goal is solely performance and you want to be running for a PB in this race, I do not recommend that this race build is a good time for you to go into a fat loss phase. Okay, so just think about the timing. You can do the race, and when you're in your off season, absolutely you can go into a fat loss phase. But think about your timing. You don't need to be doing both at the exact same time. Train for a specific performance, or you are in a race build, I don't recommend that you're in a deficit at all. I think if you're trying to train for a half marathon or a marathon and you're just trying to get the distance, you could be in a slight deficit, and that would be okay. But you can't expect to run a personal best or run your absolute fastest if you are underfueled, and if you aren't in an at least maintenance or a surplus, and you have reserves for your body to tap into to push yourself past your current limits. All right, so it's just really important to think about the timing. Then if you are going to be in a deficit while you're still training, because obviously training quality is super important, you want to make sure that you are targeting your calories around your training session. So if at the moment I'm going into a slight deficit, I still want to make sure that I can perform in training. I'm not necessarily training for a race, and that's the difference, but I still want to perform in my training. I still want to have quality training sessions. So I make sure that I eat before I train, and then I eat after I train, so that my body has plenty of nutrients to go hard in the session and also recover as hard as possible immediately afterwards. So targeting calories and targeting your food, meal timings around your nutrition. You don't want to stay in a deficit for too long. So again, we talk about fat loss phases. You don't want to be in a fat loss phase chronically or constantly forever. Go into a fat loss phase for, like, say, if it's 6 to 8 weeks, and then get yourself back to maintenance. The problem that most people have is that they're constantly trying to be in a deficit, and it just gets harder and harder because you're fighting your body's basic needs to try and lose weight. So you don't want to be in a fat loss phase for too long of a period of time. The second part to that is that you also don't want to be in too steep of a deficit. So MyFitnessPal and most of the calorie counting apps always go for like 500 calories off, no matter how many calories you have to start with. And that really frustrates me, because if you're a small woman, even me, for example, like I'm not that small, but my maintenance calories at the moment, because I'm quite sedentary, I'm sitting at my desk a lot and I'm only training 4 times a week, I'm sitting at around like 2,100 calories. Take off 500 calories from that, I'm suddenly at a really low amount of calories, and that's not enough food to sustain my brain and to look after my menstrual health and for me to function. So instead of just dropping 500 calories off like everyone does, I think it's really a much better idea to take off a percentage. So work out, and there are some calculations online that you can do to work out either how many calories your body needs to lose a kilo of fat. So you work out how many calories is required to lose a kilogram of fat per week, and then times that divide. There's some calculations, and then you basically use that to work out how many calories you need to lose 0.5% of your body weight per week. That's kind of a much better amount than trying to do just 500 calories straight off the bat. Just because of going off a percentage of your body weight means that it's much more relative to you. Or you can go a percentage off your maintenance calories. So I usually like to go between like 5 to 15%. Someone smaller, I would go closer to 5 to 10%. Someone, a bigger person or has more weight to lose, can go close to that 15%. Obviously, if someone is also trying to train for a race, I would be going in a smaller deficit. If they are like, no, I just want to go hard, do a fat loss phase, we can go a little bit higher because it's only going to be a short amount of time. So there's so many different variables that you want to put together and be thinking about when you do go into your fat loss phase, rather than just going off the real generic 500 calories and make sure you're in a calories in versus calories out. There's so much more to it. The second part to that as well is if you are in low energy balance for a long period of time, your body does not have the energy to do all the things that you want to do and to move as much as you were. So you end up burning less calories, which means you have to be in even a bigger deficit, or you have to eat even less calories to remain in the same amount of deficit. When that's compared to being in a smaller deficit, you can still move and do all the things that you were doing before because you have the energy to do so. So you stay in that small deficit, eating a lot of food and doing a lot of movement. And again, I get so mad when people are like, oh, it's just calories in versus calories out, because it is. But those change. those two variables change a lot depending on what's going on. And your non-exercise activity plays a huge role in how many calories you're burning on a day-to-day basis. If you're doing 10,000 steps a day versus 1,000 to 2,000 steps a day, that is going to play a big role on, and steps is just a really easy way to kind of measure. It's not necessarily the be all end all, because if you were on a bike all day, you're going to be burning more calories than if you're rested, but you might not be tracking steps. But again, side tangent. So it's really important that you're not in too steep of a deficit, that it slows you down and reduces the amount of energy that you are burning throughout the day. That's why people like tracking steps, because it keeps their non-exercise activity up. But yeah, when you're in a deficit for a long period of time, you get tired, you lose motivation, you don't want to go to the gym, you don't want to train, so your energy output decreases. So if you're in a deficit, this is your output, this is your input, you're in a deficit, but if your output decreases, suddenly you're eating the same amount, but you're now in a surplus. So that's where a lot of people run into troubles, and they're like, oh, I'm hardly eating anything, but I'm in my deficit, but I'm gaining weight, or I'm losing weight. And it's because they're actually not either burning as many calories as they think they are, or they're not able to stick to the deficit and they've ended up eating more. Like if you're on a really restrictive diet for a long period of time and then you then you end up binge eating. If eating to a diet all day, but you eat a block of chocolate at night, most people will be like, oh, I'm sticking to I'm only eating this many calories, but I can't lose weight. It's because their deficit is too steep and they can't actually stick to their diet. So on that one, next point, consistency is key. The best diet, even the best training program, if you're training for performance, is one that you can stick to for long enough to see results. And again, most people get this wrong. They're like, if I go on a really steep deficit, I'm going to lose lots of weight really quickly. But they can't stick to it, so they're not actually going to lose the weight. Same with the other way around. If you're training for performance, it's like, I'll be able to run a faster race if I run 6 or 7 times a week. But that 6 or 7 times a week, they can't recover from it. They're not eating enough. They're not sleeping enough. They don't have enough time in the day. They can't actually stick to it. So they end up not seeing the progress that they wanted, or not seeing the results that they wanted, because the plan wasn't right. So a plan that you can be consistent to is super important, and way more important than being in a massive deficit or a perfect, the perfect plan is just the one that you can stick to. And it's really as simple as that. Don't be too restrictive with types of food, and make your food taste good. They kind of go together. So in saying that, this is why I'm a big fan on measuring in some way, and that's another point later. But basically, don't be too restrictive with your food. So don't go, I'm going to cut out all yummy foods, all processed foods, and I'm just going to live off chicken, broccoli, and rice. That's going to be my weight loss diet. Because you'll stick to that for 2 weeks, and again, you're not going to be able to stick to it. It gets fucking boring. But weight loss does not have to be boring. Make your food taste good. Learn how to put spices, seasoning, and spices and stuff together so that your food actually tastes good. And don't cut out food groups. There is no need to cut out all of the carbohydrates. A, because your body needs carbohydrates for energy. B, as a female, you can be eating enough calories, and there's research behind this, you can be eating enough calories, but if you don't have enough carbohydrates, if you don't eat enough carbohydrates, even with the right amount of calories, you can still negatively impact and downregulate your menstrual cycle hormones. All right, so carbohydrates are super important. Don't just cut out food groups. They're all important. We need a huge variety of food in our diet, and if you just go and cut out certain foods and make it really restrictive, that's not actually going to help. The only reason that helps is because it puts you into a deficit. So why not figure out how to be in a slight deficit with all the foods that you still enjoy, and food still tastes good. Okay, so that's not necessarily got anything to do with being able to perform and be in a fat loss phase. But I think it's just really important lesson to remember. All right, let's talk about measuring things. Tracking calories gets a really bad rap, but it is literally just a tool. It is not the tracking calories that is toxic or negative. It's our relationship to that. Same with the scales. I'm a big believer that instead of telling women to be afraid of the scales, why do we not teach them that their value and their worth is more than what they see on the scale? That number on the scale is just a tool. If your goal is to lose weight, you need to figure out if it's actually working or not. So you need to be able to weigh yourself without spiraling, and I think sometimes it's actually good to spend a period weighing yourself every single day so you can see the fluctuations, because then if you can see the fluctuations every single day, you start to understand that it's what's happening overall in the bigger picture, not just like, oh, I gained weight overnight. Probably not the case. You probably had more salt, more carbohydrates, more water, or you haven't been to the toilet yet. And when those fluctuations from day to day are like, you see that, you can start seeing like the bigger picture trends, and that's what's more important. Back to measuring. Apologies, my brain is all over the place. So you have to measure if you want to manage something. Even if you are training for performance, this goes for training for performance as well. One of the biggest problems I see is that a lot of women have spent a lot of time dieting, and then they start training for performance, and in their heads they think that they're eating a lot because they might be eating more than they were previously, but it's still not necessarily enough to match the training load and all the things that they're doing. Especially busy mums, they're training 5-6 times a week, plus they're running around after their kids, after school, they're keeping up with their kids, they're on the go all the time. They've gone from like a diet mindset where they're trying to eat like 12 to 1400 calories. 2000 calories is going to feel like a lot, but they probably need closer to 2,500, 3,000 calories. So having some concept or some understanding of food is super important, and the amount of food, because you can't measure it. You can't manage it if you aren't measuring it. So whether you're in a fat loss phase or you're trying to train for performance and you want to adjust your nutrition, you need to measure it in some way. And that might be tracking calories, using tracking calories as a tool. But it could also just be eat the same food for 2 weeks. See what happens. See how your body responds. Are you gaining weight? Are you losing weight? Do you have energy? Are you tired all the time? Or is your weight staying the same? If your weight's staying the same and you have good energy and you have a healthy menstrual cycle, you're probably at your maintenance. So whatever that amount of food was, that's perfect. If you are trying to build muscle, you can eat a little bit more than that. If you decide you want to go into a fat loss phase, you can just eat a little bit less of that. But there's no need to cut out all of your snacks or all of your meal or a whole meal when you're trying to go into a deficit, because at like 2,250 calories, being in like a 10% deficit is 225 calories. That's not actually a lot. That's like half a portion of rice, or like, it's not a lot, but it can make all the difference. And again, that's what I think people do wrong, is when they go into a massive deficit, they're not actually eating enough to fuel their bodies. So if you are in that stage where you are trying to train, you're not necessarily training for a race, but you are still wanting to get the most out of your training and perform in training sessions, and you're wanting to be in a fat loss phase, just be in a small deficit and cut out something small. That might be having no milk with your coffee. If you have 2 or 3 coffees a day, cut out the milk with your coffee. That could be enough to put you into a slight deficit. Leave it as it is for 2 weeks, see what happens. That brings me to my next point. Adjust depending on how your body is doing. You need to be really objective, and everything is just data. So how much you weigh on the scale, whether that's going up and down, that is just data. It does not mean anything about who you are as a person, and I'm gonna beat that into you because it's important. If you want to change your body and you want to train for performance, you need to be able to measure these things without it meaning anything. It's not that deep. So when you are trying to adjust depending on how your body responds, if you have increased your training load because you're training for a race and your weight is dropping, you're in a deficit and you need to increase your calories. And that's fine. That's okay. Vice versa. If you are trying to be in a fat loss phase and the scales keep creeping up, you're probably in a surplus. So you either need to increase your expenditure, maybe that's just more steps, or decrease your food. And again, just do it in small increments. If you do a massive jump, so say you take off 500 calories or you add in like 5 training sessions, that's quite a big jump. Obviously you're not going to add 5 training sessions a day, but like say you went to like doubled or you went from 1 training session every day to 2 training sessions every single day. It's quite a big jump. So when you hit a plateau, because you're always going to hit a plateau eventually, you've got nowhere to move. If you've only taken off 225 calories and you lose as much weight as you can off that deficit, when your body starts to plateau, then you can take away a few more calories and you've still got enough to fuel your training and performance. Again, people just go wrong because they do too steep too quickly and then they've got nowhere to go. If you take off 500 calories and you're eating 1,500 calories, obviously there's going to be a whole bunch of other issues. But when your body plateaus, because your body can only adapt a certain amount. All right. where do I want to go with this? Let's start with the fitness. So when you're trying to increase your fitness, your body can actually only get like one brick at a time fitter. Say you need 4 training sessions per week to get that one brick of fitness fitter each week, or stronger, whatever it is. If you do 8 training sessions, you're still only going to get one brick of fitness faster or stronger, whatever. Same goes for fat loss. You can only lose, or in a healthy way, you can only lose a certain amount of fat in a period of time. And it's around 0.5 to 1% of your body weight per week, which doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not. But if you can accumulate that week on week on week on week, then it does end up being a lot. If you are losing a lot more than that, it ends up coming from your muscle mass and your glycogen stores and your water weight. So it's not actually losing fat, you're just depleting your body's ability to train hard and build muscle, which is going to be detrimental to your body composition goals, because it's not all about losing weight. It's actually about losing fat and maintaining your muscle mass. So to be able to do that, you can only lose a certain amount of fat each week while still maintaining your muscle mass and your glycogen stores and your ability to show up and train. Okay, so there's no need to do it quickly. Just on that as well, when people suddenly cut out carbohydrates and they lose like 4 kilos in the first 2 weeks, that is not fat. That is their glycogen stores and their water weight, which looks cool. It sounds like their diet's working, but after that, they're then going to start not being able to have any intensity in their training. Their brain's not going to be able to function because your brain needs glucose, which comes from carbohydrates. And that's when you're going to start getting really severe carbohydrate cravings. So if you flip that back, the diet that starts off looking really well, that's usually a red flag to me that someone is not eating enough to continue training for their performance. A lot of the time I start working with women, and initially the first couple of weeks, their weight actually increases. And I'm happy with that, because that means, usually if they've been a chronic dieter for all of their life, that means that their glycogen stores are now filled up, they're going to start being able to train harder, and the fat loss will come. You have to be patient. And I know that frustrates so many people. Everyone just wants that quick fix, but that quick fix is not fat loss. Fat loss doesn't happen overnight. If you are in a diet for 5 days during the week and then you eat shit and eat processed and lots of sugar and drink a lot of alcohol over the weekend, and you're going to gain 2 or 3 kilos at least. That's not fat. You haven't gained fat in 2 days. So as soon as you go back to your normal diet and you stop eating all that and having all that food that's causing the inflammation and the water storage, you're going to lose that weight. Again, it's still not fat. It's still not actually helping you get to your goals. So that's just really important. The next thing is, when you're going into either a fat loss phase or you're trying to fuel for performance, you need to figure out how you're going to navigate events. And sometimes it means if you have a goal, you have to miss out on something. All right, if you want to achieve something, nothing good comes free. So you need to figure out like what you are willing to sacrifice and what you are willing to go without to achieve your goal. And again, this applies for training for a race or training for performance or a fat loss phase. And I think people forget that it's the same thing. If you are training for a race, going out every single weekend and not showing up for your long run on a Sunday is not going to help you get there. So maybe you have to not go out on the weekends and make sure you're nailing your long runs to be able to get you to achieve the goal that you want to achieve. Same the other way around. If you are trying to be on a fat loss phase, drinking every weekend and eating takeaways and processed foods and overeating all weekend is not going to be helpful towards your goals. So you need to pick and choose your moments. You can still go and do fun things, but it might mean that you only have a couple of drinks instead of 10. And it might mean that you can't, instead of going out for dinner, you have a meal before and then you go and spend the time with your friends and be social, but you don't necessarily eat out. And again, I'm not telling you that you have to do that all the time, but if you're in a fat loss phase for 6 weeks, just suck it up, get it done. If you're training for a race, same thing. Knuckle down, sacrifice, because the goal and the results will come, but you have to just be conscious and self-aware of what you're going to miss out on and not necessarily what you're going to miss out on, but what you're going to let go of to help you achieve your goal. Same thing if you're trying to do like a savings goal. What are you not going to spend your money on so that you can save it instead? All right. That's the kind of mindset that we want to kind of hold on to. You also really need to be honest with yourself and be able to call yourself out. Like, are you, a lot of the time when people are dieting, they are unable to lose weight, is because they're lying about how much they're eating, they're lying about their expenditure, no, that's pretty much it. And so that basically means that they're not doing what they need to achieve their goal, and they blame everything outside of them. They're like, oh, it's just not working. I can't lose weight. Like, I can't diet. Oh, my foot's gone to sleep. And it actually comes back to the fact that they aren't just being honest with themselves. And it's not about, you're a bad person, you ate the cake. It's like, okay, well, I ate the cake, so now I'm over my calories, and probably means I'm not going to lose as much weight this week as I wanted. Same goes for your running. If you skip 2 or 3 runs every single week, you have to expect that you're not going to see the results that you wanted. You're not going to get as fit as you wanted, or you're not going to run as fast as you wanted because you have missed training sessions. It is what it is. It doesn't make you a bad person. There's no moral value to it. You need to learn how to zoom out and just look at it for what it is. It's just data. Sometimes you do need to reassess the plan. If you're really struggling to stick to a plan, you're really struggling to stick to a diet, you don't have energy, your training's tanking, like maybe you do need to reassess the plan and be in less of a deficit. Maybe you need to, if you can't keep up with that many training sessions, maybe you need to step it back and accept the new plan, but your progress might take longer. Or just get a coach. Get a coach that can help you assess these things and keep you on track and give you a plan that you can actually stick to, because that's probably the easiest way to do it. Instead of trying to figure it out by yourself, work with a coach. But hopefully some of these tips can help you work on where you're at and help improve what you're trying to do at the moment. The last thing that I'm going to touch on is, I think it's really important as well, before you go into a fat loss phase or at any time in your life, you need to deal with your relationship to food. I work with a lot of women who have tracked calories previously, or they've had eating disorders, and while they no longer track their food or technically make sure they're in a deficit all the time, they still know, like they still avoid eating more because they're scared of gaining weight. And you need to deal with that relationship with food before I would ever put you into a deficit, or before you can actually be eating enough and be comfortable eating enough to be training for performance. Because if you're not eating enough, you're not going to perform. But if you still have the relationship, if you have a bad relationship with food and you're so scared of eating more, that because you might gain weight, you're never going to be able to perform to your potential. So dealing with your relationship to food is going to be a massive part of this whole process. It will help you be more objective because you can zoom out and take yourself out of it. It no longer means anything about you, but you can make objective decisions on helping you achieve your goals. If you are someone who is not sure what they need to do, or where they should be going, where they should be eating more, where they should be in a deficit, where they should be avoiding a deficit, or whatever, I recommend trying to figure out what your maintenance calories are. So just track your food. Doesn't necessarily need to be tracking calories, but just eat the same for 2 weeks and see what happens. If you lose weight, you're in a deficit. If your body weight stays the same, you're at maintenance. And if you gain weight, then you're obviously in a surplus. But if you have zero energy and you feel like shit and you're always craving foods, I would bring your calories up. Get your body to a point where you can actually just eat logically like an adult, and not be having major cravings, and you're able to actually just like eat. What's the right word for this? You're actually able to eat like logically rather than eating emotionally, or because you're triggered by something, or because you're like just can't stop eating. If any of that is the case, I would try and figure out what your maintenance calories are, eat at maintenance for a while, and work on your relationship to food. Are you eating, do you eat because you're sad or do you eat because you're avoiding having a hard conversation with like your partner? And deal with that shit first, because if you haven't dealt with that shit, or you can't separate the two, it's just going to be really, really hard for you to actually be in a proper deficit, or for you to eat enough to train for performance. And if you are really struggling with that and you need more help, see a psychologist.
ask for help. You don't need to do this all on your own. I think that's another thing as well. People try to do it all on their own, but you can just ask for help like this. Other people can see things objectively for you and help you move forwards. So yeah, just to, I guess, wrap up a little bit, because I feel like I've been chatting for ages. If you are trying to train for performance and be in a calorie deficit, how do you navigate that? Make sure, think about the timing. If you're going for a race, you don't need to be in a calorie deficit. If you are just training and you're like still trying to focus on performance, but you're not actually like having a race ahead of you, then absolutely you can be in a calorie deficit, but just make sure it is a small one. Make sure you're fueling around your training sessions, and don't stay in it for too long. Make sure you come back out to maintenance and use diet breaks so that you can keep your training intensity up. You're still building muscle, you're still maintaining your muscle mass, and you're dropping fat. And then lastly, work on your relationship to your body and to food. Make sure you're not doing this because you think it's going to make you happy. That's not the case. You can absolutely try to lose weight, but it is not going to make you, and you will probably feel better about yourself, but it is not going to change how, like, your self-worth or how you see yourself. Building self-respect, being able to feed yourself like an adult, and training fucking hard, that will make you feel good about yourself. So focus on those things. Yes, you can lose a little bit of weight along the way, but think about it as like a self-respect thing and a self-discipline thing rather than a restrictive, toxic, negative thing or any moral value. Nice. Okay, well, let me know what you thought of that video. If you have any questions, chuck them in the comments. Make sure you like and please subscribe to my channel, because obviously that is going to tell me that you enjoyed this video and you want to see more. And if there is a certain topic that you would like me to discuss more in depth, let me know and I will make that on my next video. I'm going to try and do one every 2 to 3 weeks, just depending on how much uni work I've got to do and how much time I have outside of all the other things, my priorities and things that I have to get done. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. Hopefully you did too, and hopefully you've learned something. Let me know what your key takeaways are in the comments below. I love to hear how things have landed, and what you're going to work on. So yeah, have a great day, guys. See ya.